I understand it. It's very easy to get into that trap of saying I have to sort of charge whatever they're doing. But the implicit argument you're making when you're doing that is you're saying, I'm not providing any more value than my competitors are providing. And if that's true, right, then you probably should be pricing at the same amount as your competitors. But, the reality a lot of times is we usually think that we have something special or different about our offerings. It may not be like overall better. It just might be better for some customers, right? But those specific customers will see something better or different and would be willing to pay more for it.
Welcome to Think Business with Tyler, sharing our methods and strategies for success. Join in on our conversations with business owners as we highlight their triumphs and detail how they overcame the challenges they faced while continuing to grow and scale their business. It's time to think life, think success, and think business with your host, Tyler Martin.
Hey, this is Tyler. Welcome back. Get ready for an eye-opening chat with James Wilton, pricing expert extraordinaire. We dive deep into tiered pricing, customer segmentation, and nailing the perfect price for your business, plus some personal stories that truly inspire. Hey, James, welcome to the Think Business with Tyler podcast show. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I always love to start out the show just learning a little bit about you. So the two things I like to know is a little bit about yourself professionally, what you do, and then if you could share something personal, some type of personal interest, whether it be family or hobbies or whatever. I'd just love to get started that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess talking about me professionally first. So I'm the managing partner and founder of a consulting firm called Monovate. Monovate is a boutique consulting firm focused on pricing strategy, mainly focused on SaaS businesses or businesses who have recurring revenue as part of their business model. We mostly work with growing companies that are kind of in the anywhere from about the 10 million ARR level and up. We don't scale up to enterprises. We're really focused on smaller growing companies who are thinking about pricing as a mechanism for growth.
Very cool. And then how about on your personal side?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on personal side, I live in Saratoga Springs, New York, with my wife Lee, and I have 3 boys, and that keeps me pretty busy. I don't think I have as much time for hobbies as I used to. I like to, but when I do get time, I mean, I'm a bit of a comedy anorak. I did a lot of comedy performance and sketch shows and so forth when I was younger, and I still like to keep abreast with what's going on and watching new comedy shows.
Oh, wow. So you used to actually go out on stage and do skits?
I did. Wow. I sort of forced myself to try it when I was in college. There was an opportunity in my college to just kind of have a go. And I found I really liked it, and I just took it and ran with it from there. Really, it meant I did a lot of that in college. I was there was a group called the Cambridge Footlights in the UK. When I went to school, I spent a lot of time with them doing reviews, sketch shows, etc. I wrote a few pantomimes, which is a very British thing. And then when I went to business school later, I was the director of the Follies within my business school. So we produced a lot of silly, funny videos for these twice yearly reviews.
You ever were you ever on stage and you either bombed or you just had a really tough audience? Anything ever like that happen?
Once that I remember, actually, there was a bomb. I mean, actually, I was always a little risk averse with this stuff. So usually, if I didn't think I was going to go on, I didn't feel prepared, I usually just wouldn't go on if I didn't feel it was, very, very confident it was going to work. But I do remember once we did this kind of unscripted game show type thing for my college, and we kind of picked a few thematic elements there, and they just did not work. I mean, it was like the audience were not into it at all, and that felt awful. So I think as risk averse as I was before then, I was doubly risk averse afterwards. It probably helped me do better later on in my comedy career. That's
awesome. Well, I say kudos to you, man. That's kind of a bucket list thing someday to get on stage and do some improv. I'll probably never do it, but I always think about it. I admire the folks that can get up there and just kind of off the cuff kind of roll with things as they happen on stage. It's pretty amazing, actually.
It's I've actually found it quite applicable to business as well, right? I feel like if you're doing a comedy performance, the audience is actually usually quite nervous. They're almost as nervous as you are, because it's not fun, unless you're one of these guys who loves heckling, right? Most of the audience members, they don't want to be there and not be enjoying it because it's super awkward. They want to know that they're in safe hands and it's going to be funny. So I always used to coach new comics who were trying this out to sort of come on and just try to get a good, decent joke on like in the first 30 seconds or so, and then once you sort of start them laughing, it's just so much easier to just keep them in that zone rather than try to get them back. And obviously, you're not always doing a comedy routine when you're doing a presentation, but just going on there and being engaging and letting them know that they're in safe hands, and maybe telling a joke, just breaking the ice, just makes everything go a lot smoother from that point onwards.
Does cash flow have you down? Profit not where you think it should be? Maybe it's the long hours. Let's meet to see if I can help. I bridge driving the financial performance of your business to hit growth and success targets. Book a complimentary meeting at meetforgrowth.com to get started now. Once again, that's meetforgrowth.com. I look forward to talking with you. And thanks for listening to the show.
Breaking the ice just makes everything go a lot smoother from that point onwards.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I never really thought of it that way. I mean, the audience wants to laugh. Like they're there to be part of it. And so it is, your job is just get it started. And I think it kind of works itself out as long as you get that rolling. It's a good point.
Exactly. Keep it going.
Hey, so where I wanted to start this conversation, I know you at one point had a cancer diagnosis, and I'd love to just kind of talk about that a little bit, that actually led you into the pricing arena. And the part of the reason I wanted you on the show is, pricing is such a hot topic in small businesses, and typically in my business world, somewhere in that 1 to 10, 1 to 20 range of annual revenue, millions a year. And pricing just comes up a lot. So I thought, man, it'd be great to be able to pick your brain. And I think the audience would find it really helpful to, hear from a pricing expert. So if you don't mind sharing, I'd love to hear how that story and I shouldn't say story because it's your actual life, but how you had this life event and it led you down the path of this pricing expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it all feels a long time ago now, but it was pretty dramatic at the time. But I started off my career about 20 years ago, and I didn't know what I wanted to do when I originally left school, but I quickly decided I needed to figure it out, and I landed upon management consulting as a career path. Ended up getting a job at a firm called ZS, and just took it from there. Really enjoyed that. Went all the way through about 4 years there. Went to business school. And I decided I wanted to change there, and I came out to a management consulting firm called A.T. Kearney. It was one of the big strategy and ops firms, which was great. And I really loved my time at Kearney and the work that I did in general. But around that time, which was around about 2010-ish, 2011, very much mandatory 4-day-a-week travel model around that point. There was no real way of getting around it if you really wanted to do the kind of work that you wanted to do. And, my wife and I were, it was just us at that point. So we were able to make it work. We hung out at the weekends, and we focused on work in the week, and it was fine. We then were expecting my first son around that time as well, which was very exciting. And then about 3 months before he was due, I got diagnosed with testicular cancer. I'd realized something wasn't right, so I wanted to get it checked out. I assumed it would be don't worry about it. It's nothing, but it wasn't. It actually turned out it was testicular cancer, and it was actually technically, based on the size of the tumor, it was stage 2.
Wow.
So, it was difficult. I mean, I remember I found out on a Friday night that it was cancer. Thankfully, my doctor was very proactive, and he scheduled me in to get an operation on Monday, and they took care of it. I mean, the net was, after that, everything was fine. It just took a long time to sort of figure it out. I ended up not ever having to have chemotherapy as it happened. So although I guess I'm technically a cancer survivor, I don't feel like it because I didn't have to go through that. My doctor, because I was on the younger side, and he felt that I would be diligent about doing it, they said, like, look, you can go 2 ways. You can go the chemotherapy route, and that will make sure that it, as sure as you can be that it will not come back. Or, that would be pretty tough on you. Or you can just do the watch and wait approach, which is, we're just going to start scanning you every single month for the first year. And then, over time, you do it less and less frequently, just to make sure that you're not getting any cancer popping up in any other parts of your bodies. Because, we know it was there. We don't know if it spread anywhere else. So, so I ended up going through that. If it hasn't come back within 5 years, they clear you and say that, now you're technically no more likely to have a recurrence than anybody else is likely to get cancer. So it all kind of, like I say, looking at it from the other side, it was all fine at that time. Obviously, it was extremely stressful, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you a lot of thoughts go through your mind there, even though testicular cancer is one of the more treatable ones. And I think for me, it just makes you really take stock of what's important within your life, right? And I had my baby on the way, and I was spending a lot of my time working, and I really didn't want to be away from the family for that amount of time. And I didn't make a change immediately. He was born, and I went back to consulting. But I think I kind of found myself sort of battling to. I really wanted to be at home more and more often, and I just increasingly found that I just couldn't make it work through that consulting lifestyle. So I had one foot out of the door at that point. I think I kind of knew I knew I needed to do something else, but also I was very hesitant to leave in a sense, because I really identified as a consultant, and I didn't know what else I would want to do. As it happens, I ended up getting headhunted around this time by this internal consulting team for a big company called Relics, and this internal team focused on pricing strategy, which I hadn't done anything of at this point. But the manager of that team basically said, look, we'd love you to come over to the team and bring your big consulting experience here, and help us be better consultants, and we'll teach you pricing. You'll probably like it. The work-life balance is going to be a lot better. You're not going to have to travel anywhere near as much, and you'll get to spend more time at home. So I ended up just rolling the dice on it for that. And as it happens, it was I just found that I loved the pricing content, right? It was just way more strategic than I was expecting. There was tons of room for creativity within solutioning, and I found that I loved it. And really, I stayed in that team for about 4 years, and after that time and things were different, I decided that I wanted to go back into external consulting on slightly different terms, but I just wanted to focus on pricing, which is what I've done ever since.
Wow, that's a cool story. I mean, I'm always amazed when sometimes life deals us, things, whether it be health or loss of job. It sometimes forces us out of our routine of what we may have stayed with or what we continue to do, and then we pivot. And sometimes those pivots are the best things that ever happened to us.
Absolutely.
So it's cool that I couldn't even imagine, aside from your health diagnosis, I couldn't even imagine traveling 4 times a week. That would just wear me out.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you kind of, when you're doing something and it feels fine, and then you stop doing it and you look back at it and you're like, why was I ever doing that? That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
I think the thing with me is I ended up doing it again later in my career, right? I kind of drifted back into it without meaning to. It just kind of crept up there, and then stopped doing it, and again looked back and said, I ended up in that situation again.
Yeah, I get it. It's funny. I equate to that to billable time. So many years ago, I used to be part of a CPA firm, and you had to record all your time as billable time. And it was like the
Right.
bane of my existence. I hated recording time, right? And then next stage of my career, this was many years ago, I took a role that required you to report your billable time. And it took me like about 2 weeks to go, I am not doing this. I hate this. I hate having to track every minute that I'm spending. I hate to even be thinking that way. So it's kind of a little bit of a different lane, but kind of the same thing where sometimes we circle back and have to be reminded how much we don't really like something.
Absolutely.
Hey, so I want to get into this pricing. So help me, let's try to think like business owners. And I know that's a little bit different than SaaS, but I think there's a lot of overlap here. When we're talking about like pricing, maybe start is basic. Like, what are things that we're thinking about strategically when you're, especially, what I see a lot of times is business owners don't charge enough for their services or their products. So maybe, and if you need more information from me in terms of sharing you that, I'm more than happy to do that. But I'd like to start a little wide. Like, what are some things we should be thinking about? And then how do we handle that change of price structure? Any thoughts around getting started in this pricing discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that. I mean, maybe like if we talk about a couple of principles that carry, because yeah, I think the interesting thing with pricing is, pricing does look different across different industries, and the customer bases you're selling into, and the types of products, and the revenue models, and so forth. But what I think is important to know is that people do tend to assume that all these disciplines are completely different, but the reality is that there's general good principles for strong pricing, and they carry across all these industries. You just you focus on different elements of them more or less in different places, and you apply them slightly differently depending on what you're doing. So everything is very much related in that sense. And I think a few things that are really important to think about is, firstly, we always say how you price is more important than what you price, right? We tend to focus on pricing on the number a lot, right? Like, how much can I charge for this? But the reality is how you sort of structure that, how you think about the options that you present to customers. If you're in a B2B business, the way that you scale the price to different customers, like the messaging and the positioning and the choices that you make around that are ultimately going to make you more or less likely to get that overall price point as well. So you really want to be thinking about what is that structure? What is that? How do I kind of create these different price points through that structure? Position it in a value aligned way and kind of lead my higher willingness to pay customers to pay the prices that they want to pay, and lower willingness to pay customers will end up being able to buy something, but it'll be a lower price. And that's incredibly important. I say it helps you sell, also helps you price differentiate, obviously, right? If you're ending up doing a flat price to absolutely everybody, you're basically pitching to the middle, right? You're just trying to catch everybody with the same price point. The reality is that even if you're selling something relatively simple, like, I don't know, like a cup of coffee, right? There are going to be people who are going to have a really high willingness to pay for that cup of coffee, and there are going to be people who would not pay much at all. If you sort of pick that one price, you're instantly going to exclude from your market a lot of people who would have bought something, right, for a lower price. And there's a lot of people who would have bought more that you're under monetizing because you couldn't give them anything which is a higher price point. So you start thinking about that stratification, and there's lots of different ways of doing it. That's a massive way of helping you, for want of a better word, capture more value from that market. If you just go from a simple single price point to a tiered strategy, for example, I've seen companies easily add 30% to their revenues and big impacts to their profits just by introducing something as simple as that.
And those pricing points obviously are like different things are being bundled in them. Is that a fair statement?
Can be, yeah. Sometimes
Okay.
Sometimes it's like, we think of, this is like SaaS language, but again, it applies to different areas. Like you think of there's packaging, right, which is really thinking about how do I create different offerings. So you've probably gone on all these SaaS websites. If you're buying an app or something, right, there's the basic, there's the standard, there's the premium offering, and you see all the different features and things that are included. That's an example of packaging or tiering within that. So you're basically saying, I'm going to create different offerings of different value, and I'm going to charge different price points for them, and I'm going to let my customers self-select what price point they want to pay based on these things. And there's a lot of art and science involved in building out those offerings properly and making sure you catch the right people at the right price points and so forth. But that is a very powerful way of doing it. It's not the only way of doing it as well. There's also ways that you can just literally charge different customers different amounts for exactly the same thing. And a good example of that, I think of you think it. I guess it's a simple thing of an auction, right? Well, you think of somebody haggling on a street, right? Somebody's got a stall on a street and they're selling you vases or something, right? I'm going to go in there and they're going to try to sell. They're going to try to sell these vases at the best price point as they can, and they're going to look at the customers and try to figure out what their willingness to pay is and position it. That's quite an unstructured way of doing it, but they're ultimately trying to do that. They're trying to maximize the value captured by pricing explicitly to willingness to pay. In SaaS, you have price metrics, right? So like for a large company, I might be setting my price on users. So like a really large company is going to need to buy a ton of users because they have a lot of people doing it. They're going to pay a high price point, whereas a smaller company is going to end up buying fewer users and have a small price point. Lots of different price metrics that you can use, but sort of fundamentally there, you're giving them the same software. You're just charging a different amount for it based on the fact that they're going to get different value from it based on their scale and based that they're going to be willing to pay different amounts for it.
If you're a business owner feeling stuck in your business, overwhelmed, responsible for everything that happens, and working long hours, Tyler helps his clients develop processes, hire high-performing team members, and better understand their financial metrics and numbers to allow for a more predictable, less hands-on business. To schedule a free, no-pressure consultation, head to thinktyler.com and click the meeting button. Tyler would love to see if he can help you work on your business, not in your business. Schedule a consultation today at thinktyler.com. Think life, think success, think business.
This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian makes the team collaboration software that powers enterprise businesses around the world, including over 80% of the Fortune 500. With Atlassian's AI-powered software like Jira, Confluence, and Loom, you'll have more time to do the work that matters. In fact, Atlassian customers experience a 25% reduction in project duration per year. Unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.
Life is hard, but finding a really great podcast makes the days go by so much easier. Hi, my name is Blue Telusma. I'm a writer, an emotional intelligence coach, and the host of Humanize with Blue Telusma, a podcast where we believe that when you humanize everyone in the room, a great conversation is almost guaranteed. Join us every week here on Electricast as me and my guest co-hosts unpack big topics and interview even bigger personalities with a sense of humor and a dash of mischief. If you're looking for a new best friend in your head, we've got you covered. Electricast.
You're just charging a different amount for it based on the fact that they're going to get different value from it based on their scale and based that they're going to be willing to pay different amounts for it.
Got it. What would you say? You know what I hear a lot of times, especially as it relates to local businesses. Let's say you're providing a service, your home service business, and you service a certain geography, maybe 20 miles out. I hear this a lot. They'll say, hey, we can only price what our competitor's pricing. Right. So if my competitor charges $100, I can't charge $110 because they only charge $100. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, that's a big mistake, like a pitfall to avoid, right? And I understand it. It's very easy to get into that trap of saying I have to sort of charge whatever they're doing. But the implicit argument you're making when you're doing that is you're saying I'm not providing any more value than my competitors are providing. And if that's true, right, then you probably should be pricing at the same amount as your competitors. But the reality a lot of times is we usually think that we have something special or different about our offerings. It may not be like overall better. It just might be better for some customers, right? But those specific customers will see something better or different and would be willing to pay more for it. There's one really good book that I recommend quite frequently. It's called Negotiating with Backbone by Reed Holden. He talks in that about the fact that there are different types of buyers. There are value buyers, right, who are going to buy based on wanting the best product. There are relationship buyers who are going to buy based on they will just want a really good relationship with their vendors, and they potentially pay extra for having that improved relationship, even if the product is the same. There are price buyers who literally just want the lowest price. They really don't care about the quality or relationship. They're just focused on getting the thing for as low as they can. And then there are poker players who are either relationship buyers or value buyers, but they try to convince you that they're price buyers in order to get a better deal. Right. And there's been studies done that says even in something that you would assume to be as commoditized as gas, right, buying gas at a petrol station, only about a third of people buying there are actually true price buyers, right? There's always something else that they are solving for. So I think it's really important to understand what is your ideal customer profile, right? For that ideal customer profile, how much of a value premium do you have? And then charging an appropriate amount more based on that value premium, and it may only be a small amount more. It could be, 20, 30% more, but just figuring out that pricing appropriately and holding your guns and just realizing that people are always going to tell you that you should be priced at the same level of the competitor. Otherwise, I'm going to go over there. But a lot of the times they won't.
Right. I also find it fascinating using exactly what you said as an example. A lot of times when people engage using home service as an example again, a lot of times when they engage them on the first phone call. So like they need something that needs to be done. The first person that answers the phone, there's some metric, I think it says like 87%. You close 87% of business that you're the first one that they talk to. Meaning the lead talks to that particular company first. The 87% of the time they go with that company. And if that metric's even close to true, which I'm sure it is in the ballpark at least, it kind of deflates the whole like you got to be the same price, because if they're only talking to one anyway, the first one that talks to them, they're not that price sensitive. They're kind of looking for the solution and having the comfort that company can provide it. So it kind of echoes, I think, similar to what you're saying.
Exactly, right. And it also means, I think, really, if you're trying to price at the right level for you, like try to find the optimum price point, part of it is understanding what your objectives are. What are you solving for, right? Do you just want to get all the customers that you possibly can and never, never lose a deal? That's usually a bad thing to do. Or do you want to solve for revenue? Are you solving for profits? When we do willingness to pay analyses, you're able to pull out from this, at what price point do you maximize sales volume? At what price point do you maximize revenue? And at what price point do you maximize profit, right? And, the profit maximizing price is always going to be higher than the revenue maximizing price, which is higher than the volume maximizing price. The revenue maximizing price, right? When you maximize the revenue, the volume that you get, the sales volume, is always going to be lower than the volume maximizing price. You will win more deals in that value maximizing price. So really, if you're solving for revenue, you have to go in with like the mindset, I'm going to lose some deals on price points. There are going to be some customers out there that are going to tell me no. But I think it's kind of hard, and I own a business. I'm in the sales environment. You see it firsthand. It's hard because you want to win every deal, and you feel like you're losing if you're not doing everything. But you have to sort of know that if you really want to solve for what's going to be best for you in terms of revenues or profits in the long term, you have to walk away from certain deals from people who are very price sensitive. That's ultimately going to help you capture more revenue and profits overall and capture more value from the market.
I love your conviction on that, because that is the fear of every business owner's. Oh my gosh, if I raise my prices, I'm going to lose a whole bunch of business. How do you know though, where's that line that you go, oh my gosh, I did adjust my pricing too much? Or a good example, I have a client, they do evaluations, and a few years ago, I think they charged like $2,200 for an evaluation. It's a 1 8-hour evaluation that this individual puts in to do. And, move the price point up to $2,500. Still has a backlog of like 6 months. Move the price point up to $2,750. Still has a backlog of like 5 months. Move the price point up to $3,000. Still has a backlog of like 4 months. I guess in this case, it's kind of easier to see because the backlog is kind of your indicator of whether the pricing is a problem or not. But if you don't have that, you're working more on you don't have that type of backlog, and it's just as leads come up, you work on them. How do you know? Is it you just have to have faith in it, or is it, you talked about building pricing points that justify your value? How do you do that as particularly a small business, because they might not have the resources of the consulting arm that you guys have, that you have access to? Any thoughts around how you can at least have some feedback on whether you're in the right direction?
Yeah. No, and there's definitely a few things you can do, and I completely accept that it's easier to do some of these than others, and your resources for doing it are going to make a difference. But as you say, I mean, they have this backlog in this case. But I think also, just if you just track what happens and you track your win rate and your overall revenues, you should be able to see that, right? Like, let's say we try raising our prices 20%. If our win rate drops from like 90% to 20%, that's obvious. That's it would be weird for you to expect that to be a good thing. I mean, you've probably gone a little bit too high in that case. Of course, also, like, when you're raising your price, if you're really doing a concerted raise, you might also have to adjust your value messaging to more accurately and compellingly reinforce the extra value that you're doing. So just because you tried and it failed doesn't mean it would never work. That's something to think about. If you have the appetite for it, you have a little bit of resources to go and do it. It's often very helpful to do a small willingness to pay study, which usually doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. If you can get like an access to a set of buyers in your space, either by a survey or by interviews, and there are people who can do this blind for you if you don't want to go in, like actually letting them know that you're doing it. You can go in and ask them the right questions and figure out, like, hey, if you were buying this kind of thing, using the Van Westendorp technique, for example, which is very classic but useful one. What price point for what we're offering is a bargain? At what price point is it starting to get expensive? At what price now is it too expensive that you would no longer consider it? And at what price is it so cheap that you'd actually start to question the quality of that product, right? And if you can start to understand that on a customer by customer basis and understand what the range is, you can see how much wiggle room that you have within that.
Yeah, that's good. That's great feedback. I love that. Now, how, in terms of having different price points, so you're getting you're capturing as much of the market as you can. We
Yep.
use the coffee example. Someone might at a price go, oh my God, I'd never pay for that. And then someone else is looking for something more premium. So when you're trying to build that differentiation for those different packages, is there any approach that's effective for doing like do you just make a list and then you kind of divide them up into different price points, or how do you approach those, for lack of better words, tiers of pricing?
Yeah, it's figuring it out. Yeah, it really comes down to getting a good customer understanding. I mean, the best thing to do there is to talk to your customers. Let's say you only have one offering right now. Having conversations with them and saying like, hey, look, we provide this to you. What else would be of value for you? What are the things that we could maybe do for you that would make this even better for you? Right? If you just It's another good example. I mean, like the gas example, right? Like, what if there was some service around that, right? What if you had access to kind of, I don't know, might do my New Jersey example. What if somebody was to pump the gas for you? Would you change more? Would you accept more per gallon for that? You have to be quite creative with that if you haven't sort of naturally got those things already, but start to explore that. Be open. Try to get ideas. And then from that, you should get enough there that you start to hear the same things over and over again. You can start to probe for those. You can start to think about what this kind of premium tier might be that people might pay extra for. And it's really, really great if you can identify those things which are really valuable to some people, but don't cost you a lot to provide. That becomes a no-brainer. There was some work I did a few years back where we were working for a subscription box company, right? It's this kind of company where they basically send you a box of stuff every month, sort of novelty goods. And they only had one tier of this. They had a few different themes that you could buy, but within your theme, you just had one tier. And they wanted to explore the idea of this premium tier. So we ran some consumer research and just kind of got their sort of level of interest in these things that we could add to this box that would make it compelling, and then ask questions. Assume that you got some of these things within this box. What are those price points that you would think about? I mean, net, we ended up building for them a price point for this box. The higher level box was priced, I think, about 30% higher than that standard box, and ended up actually with a really higher than you would think portion of customers who would end up buying this premium tier. And again, these weren't things that were hugely expensive for them to do. The margin on this higher box was considerably higher. So very powerful if you can do it, but it all starts with the customer. You really have to understand their needs and how the needs of those customers change across your different segments with different willingness to pay.
Yeah, I am fascinated by even my own behavior when it comes to buying, but just human behavior in general. Like, it is little things sometimes. If they're packaged and positioned the right way, you'll pay substantially more or at least I will, because I want that part of the product to be included.
Yep.
And then other times I scratch my head, especially in the SaaS world, how sometimes they price things and I'm like, no, I mean, I'm not even going to use your product because you just priced this wrong. Like, I'm not going to, some product I'm going to use once a month at most, maybe, or once every 6 months. I'm not going to pay a year license. Or if you are going to want me to sign a year license, you better make the entry point really small.
Yep.
Otherwise, there's no value in it for me. But I'm amazed sometimes. There's a software product right now that I've looked at and I would sign up for in a heartbeat, but they're charging $400 a month. And it's a product that their competitors all charge $100 for. Now, they do have a nicer interface, but that aside, it's not 4 times more.
Right.
It's interesting. It's a very fascinating area of pricing.
It really is. It really is. And honestly, we haven't even sort of touched on the psychology you get into of the buying decision when you start to do these as well. I mean, it's not my field to do this research, but there has been research done in the behavioral economic space that shows that just by giving somebody a set of simple choices, they are more likely to make a purchase decision than if you just give them like this is my product, take it or leave it, right? And we tend to think, oh, well, we'll just give them one product that is simple, that'll make it easy.
Right.
But actually, by only having one option, you shoot yourself in the foot. And the reason is because it's hard for customers when you only give them one option to know whether it's a good deal or a bad deal, right? Like, imagine you were going to go and buy a laptop and you go to a Best Buy or something. That's a very classic example of buying a laptop, I guess. But you go to Best Buy and you say, hey, I'd like to buy a laptop. And they say, oh yeah, we have a laptop. Here it is. It's $1,000. It has all this stuff. you don't really know at that point. Like, do I want this exact specs? Is that $1,000? Is that a deal? Is that bad? But if they said, hey, look, we got 3 laptops, and the bottom one's got this much RAM, and this much this Pentium processor is this fast, and you can pay a bit more to get this one, or you can pay a bit more to get this one, then you can kind of figure out where you want to be and what you need, and what price point makes sense with you. But without that point of comparison, you're just given like a one, take it or leave it. It's much more difficult. So so
Yeah.
you give people options, they're more likely to end up buying something than if you just gave them the one thing.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I mean, we want to benchmark against things when we're buying. And it does make sense that if you have 3 choices, you can kind of benchmark against which one fits for you and seems to be the most value. That's interesting. I never really thought about that. One item actually could be a disadvantage to you. That's interesting because you think logically you think one item would simplify it, but it doesn't give people. Yeah, interesting. That's great. Hey, I think I got through my questions of where I wanted to cover. Anything that maybe I left out, any action items or anything, maybe take homes that we could give the audience that maybe I didn't ask you about?
I think we got through quite a lot of stuff, actually, Tyler. I mean, I think of the things that I would call out that are really important for people to think about when they're building a pricing strategy is price differentiate, as we talked about, right? Try to figure out ways of setting different prices for different customers. There's lots of different ways of doing it. Consider your objectives, right? Like, you have to think about what you're trying to achieve. Like we said, if you want to go out there and get as much customer volume as you can, the right pricing strategy for you, both in terms of price levels and the structure, is going to look very different to a pricing strategy where you want to maximize revenue or profit. So understanding what you're trying to achieve, or if you're trying to achieve several things, which people often are, understanding how relatively important those are going to be really, really important. And I think you called it out as well, right? Don't just price at the level of competitors. Figure out what your value is and price appropriately given that level of value. That may take a little bit of work for you in doing your own research or getting someone else to do it, but it's it's such an important decision, right? Being able to charge 20% more for your products is going to make a huge difference for most companies. So it's usually worth the investment to figure it out.
Yeah, I love that you say that. A lot of times I'll do for clients, I'll kind of model out and say, hey, if we got 10% more over 1,000 visits or whatever, and you just kind of model that out and you put that in an annual figure, people are just blown away. They're like, oh my gosh,
100%.
I could add $200,000 to my bottom line just by that little bit of an incremental change. Yeah, you can.
Exactly right. I mean, and especially it's even more impactful. I mean, a lot of the times when we're working with SaaS, the costs, compared to a lot of businesses are relatively low, right? So it's usually a high margin. If you're in a business model where there's high costs, you may be getting somewhere between 10 to 20% margins. Getting 10% extra price in terms of your profits is game changing, right? It's a completely different business at that point. So it makes a ton of difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, hey, you've given just a ton of wisdom, not bombs here today in just a short amount of time. I feel like it's a mini masterclass. In the show notes, I'll put your website. It's monovate.com.
Correct.
These will be at thinktyler.com. I'll put in the show notes. Monovate is spelled MONEVATE.com. And then I also want to mention, I know in October, a tentative date, you've got a book coming out called Capture Value. And this is a little bit more geared towards SaaS companies from what I understand, but I imagine there's good knowledge just there in pricing strategy in general. Do you want to talk about that a little bit before we wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so it's Capturing Value, it's a book that I've written, and it is really written explicitly for SaaS leaders who I run into a lot of clients who are told one day, hey, you have to build a pricing strategy, and they haven't got any experience in building pricing strategies. If you look into the internet, it's full of information which is either misleading or wrong. So they don't have money for consultants. They're already in quite of a difficult position. So the idea behind this book is to give the information and anecdotes and kind of process to walk them through the steps of this is what you need to think about to be able to build a pricing strategy. And it is written through the lens of SaaS. But as I've said, good pricing is good pricing, and the principles carry. So, so I think even if you're in a business which is not SaaS or recurring revenue, there will still be things for you in there that can help you think about the way that you should be pricing your products.
Does cash flow have you down? Profit not where you think it should be? Maybe it's the long hours. Let's meet to see if I can help. I bridge driving the financial performance of your business to hit growth and success targets. Book a complimentary meeting at meetforgrowth.com to get started now. Once again, that's meetforgrowth.com. I look forward to talking with you. And thanks for listening to the show.
If you're in a business which is not SaaS or recurring revenue, there'll still be things for you in there that can help you think about the way that you should be pricing your products.
Very cool. Well, hey, James, thanks so much for coming on the show. I'd love for you maybe to circle back when that book does go live. Maybe we could do another round. And just thanks for sharing so much. I'm sure the audience, as well as myself, got a lot out of this.
No, absolutely. Happy to come. Thanks for having me on, Tyler. It's been great to chat.
Okay, take care.
Cheers. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Think Business with Tyler. But we have plenty more resources to help you in your pursuit of business excellence on our website at thinktyler.com. If you'd like to be featured in a future episode of the show, feel free to reach out to us on social media at think_Tyler. We look forward to helping you think life, think success, and think business.
Electricast.